Hey everyone, and happy Friday. This is Clean My Space Live number 22, and today we are here with a very special guest. Now, we just had a technical issue and everyone hopped back off. We did a little prayer to the internet gods and then we got back on, and we are hopeful that everything is going to go off without a hitch for this episode. Today on the episode, we have an amazing guest, someone who I've known for a few years. I feel very lucky to know him. And I'm just going to read his intro because he's accomplished. And normally I can just rattle these off the top of my head, but we've got a lot of info to cover here. So today I'm so glad that we have our guest Joshua Fields Millburn here. He is from the Minimalists, which is a podcast. They are also Netflix producers. They have a couple of Netflix movies out, and I will get to those in a minute, as well as an author. So why don't I just read the thing? All right, Joshua Fields Millburn is a New York Times bestselling author, Emmy-nominated Netflix filmmaker, podcaster, writing instructor, and international speaker. He's best known as one half of the Minimalists. He is the author of 5 books, including his critically acclaimed memoir, Everything That Remains. He's been featured in a number of different media outlets, running from Time Magazine to USA Today, Boston Globe, Seattle Times, Village Voice, Architectural Digest, and so many more. We've got lots of people on here. Welcome, everyone. Thanks. Nice to see you back here. He was born in Dayton, Ohio in 1981, making him 1 year older than me, and he currently resides in California, which if I had to, I would say is either my first or second state. It would fight with Hawaii. Okay, the Minimalists are American authors, podcasters, filmmakers, and public speakers. Joshua Fields Millburn and Ryan Nicodemus, who I also know Ryan's not here, but I think we're going to get him on another episode, promote a minimalist lifestyle. They are known for the Netflix documentaries Minimalism, that came out in 2016, and the Emmy-nominated Less Is Now in 2021. The New York Times best-selling book Love People, Use Less Things in 2021, the Minimalists podcast, and of course their minimalism blog. In 2022, educator TK Coleman joined the Minimalists as a podcast co-host as well. So with that incredible intro, I'm very glad to introduce you to Joshua Fields Millburn. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
I'm so glad you're here, and it's a pleasure. We can actually hear each other. So there we go.
You're one of my all-time favorite podcast guests on The Minimalist. So it's great to have this conversation with you and in front of some of these people. I'm sure they have some interesting questions.
That is so nice of you to say. I was so excited to do your podcast. We flew to LA. We went to your studio. We made a little family trip out of it. And it was so lovely to meet the two of you. And, you know, for people who only see the two of you on TV or hear your podcasts, they might not have a sense of who you are. But I just want to share with the audience, between you and Ryan, you are like the most genuine people. I remember Chad was in the lobby waiting with Riley while I was finishing up, and Chad went to introduce himself, and Ryan just went in for a big hug, and he's like, "I'm a hugger." Like, you guys are you're just lovely, sweet people, and it was such a joy, such a pleasure to get to know you and be on your podcast, and I'm so glad that you're here today.
It's one of my favorite things. When we did an interview with Time Magazine, the beginning of it, at one point they said, if there's one thing you need to know about Joshua Fields Millburn and Ryan Nicodemus, is they are huggers. And
yes.
People often know that from our first film, because we've been around the country. You know, we've done, I think, 11 tours now, and we just go to bookstores or theaters or comedy clubs sometimes. And we're just, you know, it's a great thing to do because the hugs are free and transferable, and it opens up this space between people that often feels awkward, and it gets rid of all of that awkwardness almost immediately.
And not only that, I would say because the two of you are so known, people might feel that there's that layer that would sort of prevent them from making a personal and deep connection with you in that way. Like they might just want to wave or shake your hand or even just introduce themselves without that physical touch. But you're right, by inviting a hug, it kind of shows them, hey, we're on level, like we're people too, and we're just really glad to meet you. And I know from the time that we've spent together, and of course from listening to some of your work and watching your movies on Netflix, like you care so deeply about not only people's spaces and how they transform, but also people themselves and how they transform and just how they become sort of deeper, more in tune people. And I know you both had that transition. So it's so nice that you invite that even in your talks and the work that you do in public.
I think it's something fascinating about the spaces that you're talking about. The average American household has 300,000 items in it. And that's not me going around counting people's stuff. That's according to the LA Times. And I think that'd be wonderful if it was making us more happy and joyous and we felt more free and at peace. But you and I both know it's often the opposite. When we acquire more stuff, we have more things to take care of, more things to worry about, and then we produce all these other types of clutter as well. And so what I found in our homes, when we have a lot of excess stuff, those material possessions are just a physical manifestation of what's going on inside us. So if I've got a lot of clutter in my home, and by the way, clutter is just stuff that gets in the way. And usually it's stuff that gets in the way of your peace or your joy.
Mm.
And if I have a lot of external clutter, it probably means I have a lot of internal clutter. So I have mental clutter, emotional clutter, spiritual clutter. Maybe I have calendar clutter. You ever catch yourself saying, oh, what are you up to? Oh, I'm just so busy right now. Well, for me, busy is the worst 4-letter word in the English language, right? Because busy simply means that my life is out of control. I don't even control my own calendar anymore. Everyone else's urgency has become an emergency for me. And so we've identified all of these different types of clutter. It starts with the material possessions, right? Getting rid of the excess stuff. That's the stuff that's easy to see. But what else is getting in the way? That's really what's fascinating to me.
Yeah. And I think that's what's kept the two and now the three of you going. And that's what's just allowed your audience to continue to stay with you after all this time, because you're on a journey with them and you're not just saying, get rid of stuff, keep your house clean. Like you're really about just finding ways to transform your life in different facets. And I find that so interesting about your work. I want to just remind our audience real quick that there is a link to the episode that I did with the Minimalists. It's in the description box, and you can check that out. And I would encourage you to, because it was a really nice conversation. And as we were just recollecting, it was just a shade before COVID happened. It was I want to say it was October 2019,
Yeah.
and then COVID hit. And it's funny because we got a question about this, and I want to ask you about it as well. And before I get into some of the questions, I would love to just ask the audience, let us know where you're visiting from or watching from today. And of course, any questions that you have for Joshua, please put them in the comments. If you have any questions about decluttering or minimalism, you cannot ask for a better person to answer your question today. So please ask your question. I'm going to start off with a question that both Sing It and I share. What has been one of the biggest changes in the minimalism space that you've observed since the onset of COVID? And then Sing It sort of had a different take on it. But I would love to know sort of how the pandemic changed things.
Yeah, it changed a lot of things for a lot of people, right? Because a lot of us were now stuck in our homes for the first time, and we were looking around at all of this stuff that we finally had to confront because it was
Mm,
confronting us. Before, we were leaving, going to a job and going to restaurants and going to parks and wherever we weren't always at home, and so we weren't as confronted by the material possessions that we had accumulated. I remember at the early onset of the lockdowns, people were in a relatively snarky way reaching out saying, "Oh, I bet you regret getting rid of all of those things that you minimized over the last decade." And to me, my response to that was, oh yeah, I really miss the broken waffle iron that I never used. I mean,
Right.
here's the thing. I didn't get rid of anything that was truly important to me. And I think that's the
Right.
essence of minimalism. People often think it's about just living somewhere with stark white walls. And you can do that. As you can see, I'm in a space that's fairly stark, but this is my office at home. But the the space that I live in doesn't have any excess. And that's really what getting rid of the clutter is. But that looks different for everyone. I wish there was a list of the 100 items that you should own as a minimalist. And now you're going to be perpetually blissful. But of course, simplifying doesn't work like that. Anyone watching this right now could go home. You could rent a gigantic dumpster. You could throw all your stuff in that dumpster and actually be worse off after getting
Mm,
rid of everything. Minimalism or simplifying is not about simply getting rid of everything you own. It's about identifying what's important and getting rid of the things that get in the way of what's important. And I think the opposite of that is also true. Minimalism is also not just about organizing one's home. In fact, I work with a lot of professional organizers, and they know this better than anyone. Professional organizers don't actually organize people's stuff. They help people minimize it, or at least the best ones do.
mm,
Because you can have 300,000 items and you just go to the Container Store or Walmart and you buy a bunch of bins and boxes and you organize those 300,000 items. That didn't really solve the problem. You've just hidden the clutter. And so quite often organizing is well-planned hoarding. What I've realized
mm,
is when we hold on to everything and just make it look neat, that doesn't solve the problem. It's still up here. It's in the back of your mind, and you still have to confront the stuff. Of course, the best way to organize your stuff is to get rid of most of it. Get rid of anything that is superfluous, anything that is junk, and then you're making room for the things that do add value to your life. Here's a weird paradox for you. As a minimalist, everything I own serves a purpose or it amplifies my joy in some way. So as a minimalist, guess what? I actually get far more value from my material possessions than before I was a minimalist, because
mm,
everything I own, it has some sort of function, whether it's my car or my clothes or my kitchenware or my furniture. These are things that I use, and they amplify the aesthetic beauty of my life, the functionality of my life, and they don't get in the way of my peace.
mm. Yeah, that's certainly some food for thought. I love a good paradox. And I know your content is full of that and sort of these little thought nuggets too. Things, you are all so prolific. I mean, I haven't heard TK, but I know you and Ryan, you say some really interesting things that just make you stop and think.
Oh, well, wait till you hear
So,
TK. He's educator, philosopher. We brought him onto the podcast a few years ago, and it added this whole deeper dimension to examining the things that clutter our lives.
wow. I'm going to be downloading some podcasts and listening. I can't wait to quote unquote meet him and hear his thoughts. So when it comes to COVID then, did you find that more people shied away from being minimalist? Did you find that you got more of an audience during COVID? Like, how did people take to your content during that time?
Yeah, a lot of people tuned in because they realized that there was a lot of noise in their home, but there was a lot of
Mm,
noise really in their heads and their bodies and in their heart. They had cluttered hearts, right? And this was the first time where we were forced to sit and examine. One of my favorite quotes is from Pascal. He said that all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit alone in an empty room.
hmm,
And what we are more amplified than ever with our technology, right? We have more ways to pacify ourselves, basically, to
yeah.
avoid boredom. And we pathologize boredom as if boredom is a bad thing, but it's not. Boredom simply means that I don't have something to stimulate me right now, and that is okay. And so during the pandemic, a lot of people were looking around at their houses. They were looking around at all their stuff and saying, "Oh, this is in the way. Oh, I don't like this." They're going into their closet and say, "I haven't worn this giant orange oversized sweatshirt in at least a decade." And so they started applying these boundaries in their lives. And what they realized is these limitations actually give us more freedom. We have this free
Mm,
ebook that people can download at theminimalists.com. It's called the Minimalist Rule Book, 16 Rules for Living with Less. But they're not actual rules. They're just boundaries that you can set up in your own life. So I'll give you a couple examples that really help people through the pandemic and are helping people right now. One is called the seasonality rule. We also refer to it as the 90-90 rule. And this works really great right now in the spring because you can go to your closet, you pull out any item. Say it is a sweatshirt or a pair of pants or a pair of shoes or a belt or some jeans. Grab any item out of your closet and say, have I worn this in the last 90 days? And if the answer is no, because maybe it's a bathing suit and winter was just behind us, right? So, okay, no, I haven't worn it in the last 90 days, but will I wear it in the next 90 days? And if
Mm.
the answer is no to both of those, then I give myself permission to let it go. Now, 90 days is an arbitrary number. If it's too aggressive for you, then you could expand that. Maybe it's 180 days on each side, so that gives you a full year. But the seasonality rule, you put that in place and you realize how many things are in your
Mm.
closet that you haven't worn sometimes in years, or maybe some
Yeah.
things you haven't worn at all, things that still have the tags on them. And then the question becomes, why am I holding on to this? So during the pandemic, a lot of people started going around their houses saying, why do I own this? Does this add value to my life? Does this add value to my life? Does this add value to my life? And you realize that we hold on to a lot of things because of these three most dangerous words: just in case. I'll just hold on to this just in case I might need it someday in some non-existent hypothetical future. Or I'd get rid of this, but I think I'll hold on to it just in case. Well, just in case never ends up coming. And so what happens is we just hold on to so many things. If you held on to one thing, it wouldn't be that big of a problem. But we have
Right.
tens of thousands of just in case items in our homes. And so another rule that came up that's in that minimalist rule book that people can download for free, it's we call it the just in case rule, also known as the 2020 rule. Any item I'm holding on to just in case, if I know I'm not actually getting value from, I'm not using it, but I'm holding on to it just in case, I can get rid of it. Why? Because I can replace it for less than $20 in less than 20 minutes from wherever I am. So if you're holding on to an old tool or an old pair of jeans or whatever it might be, that at first sounds like a rule of privilege, right? Like, I don't want to go around spending $20 every day replacing my just in case items. Well, I can tell you, between Ryan and I, over the last 13 years of being minimalists, we've had to use that rule to replace something about 5 times.
Wow.
But it's given me permission to let go of so many just in case items that I was holding on to. And so the truth is, all those things I was holding on to just in case, I almost never end up missing them, regretting it. I never regret it. And I almost never have to replace those things.
Yeah. And I think one thing that goes without saying but should be said is that it is such a financially savvy way to live as well, because you get to spend big on the things that are meaningful to you, and then you don't have to waste money on small things, or things that you might like today and not like tomorrow, or sort of disposable items. um,
Yeah, I think that's
I
right.
think
There's a lot of
yeah.
financial clutter in our lives, and it's a direct result of the material clutter we have in our lives.
Yeah.
Consumerism is this thing we're all fighting against because there's so many advertisers and marketers and demographers who are trying to divorce us from the money in our checking accounts, right? There's nothing wrong with spending money on things. Minimalism doesn't necessarily have to be frugality as well. But what I've found as a beautiful byproduct of simplifying my life is I spend far less money on things I don't need, things
Yeah.
I felt the impulse to purchase, right? So consumerism is just the ideology that buying things is going to make you happier, more complete. And the problem with that is that sometimes it kind of does for a moment. It's not actual happiness. You get a burst of pleasure. It's almost like this high you get as the cash register sings its celebration of you spending your hard-earned money on that purse or that dress or that jewelry or that watch, right? And so you feel that burst of pleasure in the moment, but what happens? Well, the credit card statement shows up a month later, and then that burst of pleasure turns into a undertone of anxiety. And then what do we do to
Mhm.
try to get out of that? We buy something else, and that makes us even more anxious a month from now. And all of a sudden, before we know it, we have heaps of debt. We're going into debt. We're buying things that we don't need to impress people we don't even know. And we're using money that we don't even have. We're borrowing that money, not from someone else. We're actually borrowing that money from our future selves. I'm punishing my future self every time I go into debt to acquire something new in my life.
Yeah. And again, like for the audience that's listening, I think it is, if you're not familiar with the minimalists' work, what you're hearing Joshua say, it's like it's not only the technical, the how to declutter, but it's so much more about like the heart, the soul, the philosophy, the reasoning behind why it's a good choice to make in your life. And if nothing else has been able to compel you to get started on that journey, this would be the thing. Like listening to the way that they speak and sort of think on this topic, it's just so much bigger than getting rid of clutter. I just want to shout out a couple of new members to the Clean My Space community and thank them. We've got Dewey, who's a new member, Linda, and Krista. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link down below that you can check out, and I will leave that there for you. We've got a couple questions from the audience that I want to bring up real quick. This one's from Bell Riot, and you sort of touched on it with the 90-90 rule, but I'd be interested to hear if you have just anything else to say. How can I store my out-of-season clothes in my closet to make more space and be minimalistic at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah. So this comes up quite a bit, especially when you live. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. And so we had 4
4
distinct
seasons.
seasons, right? But really, it used to be back in the day, we would dress for 2 seasons. It's hot or cold, right? Which ultimately that's what it is. You have clothes that work for cold weather, and then you have various layers the colder that it gets, and then you have summer, and there's just fewer layers of those things, right? And so what I've found is having a relatively simple wardrobe. And no, of course, you don't have to dress in all black, right? It's just what I prefer. It's very slimming and it's nice, but some of my favorite minimalists are people like Courtney Carver, who have done Project 333. And that's a wardrobe challenge where you literally live with 33 items for 3 months. You don't get rid of everything else. You sort of box it up and don't use it. So you can set that limitation up in your own life. And you can have super colorful clothes. If you want to wear polka dots every day, that's great. Whatever you want to wear, that's totally fine. The key is, what are the limitations? What am I going to exclude from my life? And I think that's why some rules like the seasonality rule really help out with that, because the truth is, most of the things we're holding on to, it's like you might wear once a year, or you might not wear it at all. It's not very versatile. But if you get rid of everything that isn't your favorite thing, you know what's really cool about that? Then you're wearing your favorite clothes every
All the
single
time.
day, right? And so something like a Project 333, she wrote a great book about that, and she has a blog post about it as well. Courtney Carver at bemorewithless.com. And what I really enjoy about Project 333 or those limitations is it actually exposes what your favorite things are, and it makes it so
Mm.
much easier to get rid of those other things, because you're like, I don't even really like that anyway. We've all done this. We've gone into our closet, you put on the thing, the shirt or the pants, you're like, oh, I just don't feel comfortable in these. I don't like the way they fit. And then we take it off and we put it back in the drawer. It's like we've developed all these clutter coffins around our house, and I'm not ready to have a funeral for this pair of jeans yet, so I'm just going to store those in my home. We've turned our homes into mausoleums of stuff that we never use and we never wear. And that's what I mean when I talk about clutter.
Hmm. Yeah, well, wow. Again, those are some really great analogies and things I think people can think of. And when you think about clutter coffins or your drawers being coffins for things that don't fit you or that you don't love, like it certainly makes decluttering or getting rid of those seasonal pieces so much easier. And I do love the idea of just looking at things that you love, because then it's so much easier to get dressed. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So Sleep Sounds had a question, but I feel like you touched on it, but I'm just going to throw this in there. And it was, why do the minimalists wear black, or minimalists tend to wear black? So you sort of mentioned that you like it and it's slimming, but any other thoughts?
I enjoy it aesthetically. I like monochrome. I like the way things look in monochrome, and I wear some white shirts as well. But I think episode 400, as a celebration, I wore this bright purple shirt, and everyone freaked out on our podcast. And and it was to prove a point, like, that's not really for me. I don't feel the most comfortable in it. And so I wear what I feel the most comfortable in. It's sort of like having your own wardrobe. I don't even have to think about it anymore. I just go to the drawer, I pull out the shirt, and then if it's a colder day, I have a long sleeve version of the same shirt. I found a brand that works really well for me. It doesn't mean that it will work well for other people. It's a brand I feel good about because it's made in Los Angeles and it is sustainable and there's no sweatshop condition. So I feel great about that. But then there are other clothes that I will often purchase from, like if I need a new pair of jeans, I go to eBay and I find the same type of jeans that I want. I might get them gently used, or I might get them where they still are new with tags, but someone is selling them at a used price. So I found that simplifying my wardrobe really simplifies my thoughts as well. It's just something I don't
Mm.
have to think about. And now I know what people are thinking. That's great for you. You're a man. What about for women? So I'll tell you a quick story about that. A good friend of mine who was blogging early on in the minimalist space, and she was super impressive. Her name was Nina Yao. She's a yoga instructor now, and I don't think she does much writing, but I was really impressed by her. She was working in corporate HR department, and she realized that like she was getting dressed up every day and she was worrying about what she had to wear, and she didn't think like anyone was actually noticing what she wore. And so she did this crazy experiment. For 1 year, she wore the same outfit every single day, and it wasn't all black. She wore a bright red sweater, and she had like these dark colored slacks that she wore every single day for a year. And one person the entire year mentioned it to her. Hey, didn't you wear that last week? And she's like, yeah, I did wear it last week. Not mentioning, oh, yeah, I actually wore it yesterday and the day before that and the day before that and the day before that and the day before that. No one actually cares what you are wearing. So you might as well wear what you care about.
Huh. My gosh. That is fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. Um, I want to shout out the eclectic Mima who joined the community. Thank you so much for joining. So appreciate that. You know what I love about that? Um, they say like if you want to become iconic, you should have a thing. Like Michael Jackson, I mean, he was so iconic in so many ways, but like his glove, or you with your black t-shirt, and your hair is always done the same way. Like
It's a little
you
crazy
just
today.
have a thing. What's that?
I said it's a little crazy today.
Actually, your hair is perfectly there's not a hair out of place. It looks great. But that's the thing, like anytime, like that's the schema of you. That's what you look like. Black t-shirt, hair, you've got your big smile. Like that is everyone who knows you knows that is you. So I think that's the other thing to think about. If you want to sort of reduce your closet and what's in there, kind of think about what those favorite pieces are and kind of how you can create that iconic look, that thing that you're known for. And if like rainbow and you always love something rainbow, then everything in your closet should have a little bit of rainbow in there, so that that's your iconic vibe. And then that also helps you, as you say, with the boundaries. Put boundaries around what you buy and what you don't buy. So I want to ask another question, because you and I are both parents, and yeah, we've got a bunch of questions from the audience, but I feel this is so important. So your daughter, we were just chatting before, she's 10, and she grew up in your home after you made this choice. Like I
Yeah,
think this is all she's probably known.
right.
So what's it been like for her in your conversations with her? Have you noticed as well that she has a desire to maintain this lifestyle? Do you think she's going to try and rebel and get a whole bunch of stuff? And how has it been parenting her through this?
Yeah,
I mean,
I've
it's all
never
she's known.
Right. I've never told her to be a minimalist. I've never encouraged her to declutter. I've never given her advice on simplifying her life. I've simply set a standard, but I've also not prescribed a particular way of living. You could see my office right now. It's fairly stark. This is what I personally enjoy. I can look out the window here. Right before we started recording, there was a beautiful hummingbird. Right, to me, nature is the art, and the color is in nature. The color is in the conversation. But for her, she's a 10-year-old girl and she loves to have pink and purple things. And so what we talk about is I ask her questions. It's the same way I would ask our audience questions. Does this add value to your life? Are you enjoying this, right? And so she certainly has collections of things that she enjoys, but we're always talking about those things. And what I found early on with some of her toys is when she would stop playing with a toy because this is all she ever knew, she knows about generosity. When she stopped playing with a toy, she said, hey, maybe we can donate this to some kid who will play with it, who will enjoy it because I don't enjoy it anymore. And to me, that's the flip side of this letting go, is it makes a whole bunch more room, but room for what? Room for peace, room for joy, room for generosity, contributing beyond ourselves in a meaningful way. And so, of course, I'm not going to her and saying, you should be a minimalist, you should get rid of these things. I'm modeling a way of living. And yeah, when she was real little, she had little rock and stick collections. But even around that, we had boundaries, right? We're always going to have boundaries for our kids. We're helping them navigate the world with those boundaries. And so, of course, if she started collecting bird poop in her room, I wouldn't let her do that. I would set up a boundary.
There is a
And
clear line there. Yes.
right, except there isn't a clear line because we allow kids and we allow ourselves to accumulate a bunch of metaphorical crap in our homes, things that we're not getting anything from. And in fact, they're collecting dust, they're collecting worry, and they're collecting maintenance cost of us and storage cost of us holding on to these things. The storage locker industry is this giant thing, and I'm not against storage. I think there's a time and place for everything, but quite often we do it because we think it's out of sight, out of mind, but it's not actually out of mind. It's still taking up space in the back of our mind if we're storing all of these things. And so with my daughter, I simply show her the way that we live. I do my best not to be didactic or preachy about it. I simply show her the calm. And that's the thing that she notices now when she goes to friends' houses. And some of them have, standard houses. She's even been to a hoarder's house before. And she notices it, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that is truly noticing it, like, oh, I see the chaos here. And that chaos exists in relation to the calm she experiences at home.
Wow. Great answer. And I love the life lesson of bringing in generosity too. I mean, it just transcends any religion or belief. I mean, being a generous person is just a good thing to learn how to do in life. So it's beautiful that you're bringing that in at such a young age. Okay, gosh, I have a lot of questions here. I'm being very greedy, just taking up all the time, asking you all of my questions,
Let's
but
do
I
it.
want to get to some audience questions too. Just a quick comment from Libby Chapman. I pick one piece of clothing a day and I make a decision if I'm keeping it. Same with beauty products. And she's been using the Yuka app for this. Libby, I think that's awesome. I know you've been on a journey trying to declutter for a while now. And I think it's just so great that you've been able to make that transformation. So
Yeah,
good on you.
bravo. I mean, there's a few things there. We have something called the 30-day minimalism game. You can download a free calendar on our website. So, um, this is how I started simplifying my life. For me, it started with one thing a day, just as you said. So back in 2009, when I started simplifying, I said, okay, I don't know where to get started. This is so overwhelming. If the average household has 300,000 items, where do I even start? Just start somewhere. I can get rid of one item today, right? And I did that for 30 days, but it turns out I got rid of way more than one item a day because as you get that momentum, you build up that letting go muscle, then simplifying gets easier and easier by the day. And eventually we turned it into a game to make it more fun. Because I don't know about you, but for me, decluttering is kind of boring. Like, I don't want to go to my closet or my bathroom or the
I'm with
spare
you.
bedroom. Right. It's so like, oh,
There's
what am
there's
I?
not a lot of joy in it. It really requires a lot of like personal hype man work to get into the mindset.
Yeah, that's right. And I saw I think Chad just put up on the screen there, the minimalists.com/game. You can check out the game there, but I'll give you just a quick overview. We found a way to make decluttering more fun. You partner up with someone, a friend, a family member, a coworker, someone else who also wants to start letting go of some excess stuff. You start at the beginning of the month, which is right around the corner from us, and you bet whatever you want. You can bet $1, you can bet a really nice meal, you can bet, I'll pay for the concert that we're going to go to, or you pay for the concert. Whoever wins has to pay out for the bet, right? A friendly bet for some friendly competition. First day of the month, you just get rid of one item. and your friend gets rid of 1 item. Second day of the month, 2 items. Third day of the month, 3 items. Really easy at first. Anyone can get rid of 1 item. Pick any item in your home. But by the middle of the month, you're like, uh-oh, I have to get rid of 15 items today. And then tomorrow I have to get rid of 16 items. And the next day it's 17 items. So it gets more difficult as you build up that momentum. Whoever makes it the longest wins. If you both make it to the end of the month, then you've both won because you've gotten rid of about 500 items. That's a really good start. And then I've had people continue to play from there. Sometimes people start over and they just get rid of 1 item on the next month, or they go day 34, day 35, day 36. And we've had tens of thousands of people share their photos online and on social media. The minimalists aren't on social media right now, which we can certainly talk about. We decided to declutter some digital clutter recently. But what we did is we had tens of thousands of people share their photos of things they're letting go of. And then it became contagious. Wow. Other people started letting go as well. When you see other people letting go, you feel like, oh yeah, I could do that too. That would feel freer and lighter. And maybe I would be happier as a result.
I will say this, it is contagious. And if you're around other people who are doing it, you feel so much more safe and empowered to do that as well. There's a strength in numbers, definitely. So I love that this can become a contagion. I want to play this game, and I'm going to talk to a friend of mine after this who I know needs to do it as well. But thanks for bringing that up. I'm going to get that game, and let me know in the comments if you're going to do it as well. I want to get through some of these questions because, again, I don't want to take up. I know we have until 1 o'clock, and we have 4 killer questions that I want to get through. Okay, so the first one, I've got Lisa Taylor. I've decluttered a lot of easy stuff, but how do we declutter the hard emotional stuff, still keeping some for memories? I find it even hard to declutter my mom's old casserole dish.
Yes, sentimental items is really what we're talking about here. And I actually did it all wrong at first. So I just discovered minimalism before I even knew it was called minimalism. So when my mom died and my marriage ended both in the same month, my life was sort of in this chaos and my career was about to end. I didn't know it at the time, my big time corporate career. And so I went down to Florida to deal with all of my mom's stuff after she had passed from stage 4 lung cancer. And I was confronted by all of her things. And at first it was all sentimental, right? But then I realized if everything's sentimental, then nothing is sentimental. So I was looking at all of her things. She had about 3 apartments worth of stuff crammed in her tiny 1-bedroom apartment. And it's not like she was a traditional hoarder. She just had a lot of stuff, right?
Tchotchkes.
Yes. 65 years worth of accumulations, basically, right? And I gave it all meaning. But then I realized, wait a minute. It's only sentimental because I say it's sentimental. If I took mom's old dishes or her makeup that she had, or she had a whole linen closet. It looked like someone was running a hotel out of her linen closet with all the mismatched bath towels and beach towels and dish towels. And I grabbed the dish towel and I was like, oh, this is a sentimental item. But Melissa, if I handed that dish towel to you, you wouldn't be like, oh, this has so much sentiment in it. You'd be like, okay, why'd you give me this trash?
Yeah.
And so what I realize is the things have meaning only because we ascribe a meaning to them, right? It doesn't mean that sentimental items are bad, but what I realized that by letting go of the stuff that I wasn't going to use, I could actually add value to other people's lives, getting back to the generosity thing. So I sold a lot of her things, donated that money to the 2 charities that helped her through her chemo and radiation treatments when she was still alive. And then a lot of things I gave to her friends and family in St. Petersburg, Florida, when she was down there, because they were able to actually use it. Because if I was going to hold on to it, what was I going to do? Either put it in my basement, but I already had a full basement full of stuff. And so I rented a storage locker. And I was like, oh, I'll just keep all of her things in a storage locker. Why? Well, just in case. Just in case I might need them. And of course, I was never going to use them or get value from them. But by letting go, someone else could get value from it. And then the paradox of that is I held on to 5 or 6 different sentimental items. And those things have far more value to me now than if I were to water them down with tens of thousands of useless trinkets sitting in a storage locker on the edge of town.
Yeah. When that I so appreciate you sharing that story. I remember hearing this story about your mother. And we had another question about sentimental value from Kay Scrogg. It's essentially in the same vein, so we don't have to, have you repeat it. But I know when my grandmother passed away, there were so like my mom and her two sisters did so much work decluttering. That's the question that you can see there, Joshua. But you did such a great job answering the first one. There was so much clutter that my mom and my aunts had to sort through. And then I remember the grandkids, like we all just adored our grandmother, our booby. And, I remember I have two things from her, and they're here in the house. And every time I pass them, they make me smile. And I
Yeah.
don't need anything else. I didn't take any, it just like there wasn't anything else that I needed from her. It was just like those two little things. They were from Bubby's house. I will always honor them. And that's all I needed. And my mom, she went on a very similar journey to what both of you and Ryan went through. And she used to have all kinds of stuff. And then she downsized a bunch of times. And now her whole idea is like, when I die, I don't want to burden you kids with my place. Like I am just living on what I need. And she lives in a small space. She doesn't even have a storage locker. And it is so perfect for her. She has just curated her life, and everything that's in her condo is exactly what she needs.
Nice.
Okay. This is okay. I think you're going to have so much to say on this topic. We have two questions along the same line. So I'll read both of them so you get the vibe. And then I just want to hear your answer. This one's from Bell Riot. I started to declutter my belongings, but I'm struggling to get my partner on board to declutter his belongings. What can I do to be supportive? I'm trying to be as minimalistic as possible. And then Maribel asks, my husband does not have the same passion for organizing and minimalism as I do. In fact, he is my opposite. Can you please advise how I should handle this situation because it causes me so much anxiety?
Yeah. So first thing I'll say is I totally recognize where you are. We often have people come to our live events, and we do a bunch of live events, and we have deep connection with people at those. And quite often it'll be like, "Hey, I brought my husband with me today, or I brought my wife with me today. How do I force them to become a
Yeah, I want to
minimalist?"
indoctrinate them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How do I? And it's like, well, you don't do that, right? You'll never hear Ryan and I and TK, we don't talk about the 67 ways to declutter your closet. I think those things can be helpful mechanically for sure. But what is much more important is the why. And so I disguise the why with a how question. And so here's a question for both of those people who just asked the question. And that question is this: how might your life be better with less?
Hmm.
We started our last Netflix film with that question. And that's really what we examined in that film, Less is Now, because what we learn is that the why is so much more beneficial than the how. You can show someone how to declutter a closet, but it doesn't matter. In
Yeah.
fact, if you don't show them why they're doing it, the closet will be recluttered a month from now or a year from now. But if you understand the why, because the decluttering is not about decluttering, it's about what you're uncovering beneath all of that clutter. For some people, it's financial freedom. For some people, I just want a cleaner house, a tidier house, because the house is driving me crazy, the chaos there. So maybe it's more calm for some people.
Hmm.
For other people, it's like, I'd love to be able to spend my time traveling more. For some people, it's like, I don't want to be tied to this lifestyle anymore because I'm tied to a corporate job that I don't want to be a part of, and I need to untether myself from this lifestyle. So, what are you freeing up by getting rid of the clutter? So how might your life be better with less? And asking your significant other that question helps them identify what the benefits are for them, because right now they see the benefits for you, but they don't see the benefits for them. Like, oh, it's great that you're simplifying, but I don't really see the benefits for it for me. That's just because the benefits are different for them than they are for you. So you have to help them see the benefits on their side of the equation, not your benefits.
Yeah. And, I'll say this just to add to that, because that was such a great point. Um, but it's also about finding sort of the root cause instead of dealing with the symptoms. And I think that's what so many people think when they say, I want so and so to declutter, or I want them to live with less, or I want them to find a way to declutter because I'm decluttering. And that is so symptomatic, it's so topical. Whereas really, it's the root cause. Why are we holding on to this? Why do we still need this? And once you can drill down, which is exactly what you're saying, this is just in sort of a different way. Once you can do that, then you, as you say, you have the why. Your soul has been changed, right?
Yes.
And you no longer have to sort of toggle between this place and that place anymore. Like you just feel, there's a shift. So it's no longer like you have to struggle. It's sort of like when someone, they have a health event and then they realize, wow, I have to change my lifestyle. It's
Yes.
not even like a choice anymore. I have to, or else I'm not going to survive. And once you've been given sort of that ultimatum, then you realize, wow, I've been given a second chance. What do I have to do to be here? And once you have that shift, then you can start to make those changes and you don't have to struggle so hard. Because I do think for someone who hasn't had that change and made that choice, it feels absolutely painful to
Mm.
declutter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I loved your answer. I want to ask Alicia's question. This is so interesting. Um, Alicia Falcon says, is decor allowed in a minimalist space?
Yes, indeed. I mean, you can see my space up my little pet rock behind me here. That's actually a essential oil diffuser rock. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, if you go into the rest of my home, there's quite a bit of decor. It seems, in fact, I think if you look at the house, it seems fairly normal. People, when they come over to our house, especially like parents of Ella's friends, my daughter, um, they walk in and they don't say, "Oh my God, this must be a minimalist house." They say, "Oh wow, this is really clean and tidy. How do you do that?"
yeah.
And and or often they'll say, "I wish I could do that." And it's like, "Oh, but you can." As
Go
soon as
to
you understand.
minimalist.com.
That's right. You
Play
you
the
you can
game.
do it, and it's totally free to let go. It doesn't cost you anything, but that's not true. It does cost you some time and attention. You actually have to pay attention to the stuff that's been getting in the
Yeah.
way. And so, but it doesn't cost you anything financially. It's no cost in that respect, because letting go is not only free, but it is freeing. And so the stuff is overwhelming. If you want to get rid of the overwhelm, well, then if you want to get rid of the effect, you remove the cause. And quite often, the stuff is the cause of that anxiety, the overwhelm, the anxiousness that we feel in our everyday lives. Like there's a current of dissatisfaction and discontent, and it often manifests in our material possessions. There's one other rule that we have in that minimalist rule book that is my favorite rule, and it's called the spontaneous combustion rule. You could pick any item in your home, any item at all, and you hold it up and you say, if this thing were to spontaneously combust right now, let's say it's a pair of jeans, or maybe it is an old guitar, or it is a book that you read years ago, whatever it is. If this item were to spontaneously combust, would I replace it, or would I feel relief? And if
Hmm.
the answer is I'd replace it, then great. Then why would I don't want to get rid of that thing. But if the answer, which more often than not, the answer is the latter, I would actually feel relief if this thing just spontaneously combusted. Well, that's a surefire sign that I want to let go.
Wow. I love that rule, and, makes me wonder if you were the kind of kid that would hold a magnifying glass up to ants when you were younger. If that's where the nomenclature came from on that one.
No insects were harmed in the making of this live stream.
Thank God. Okay. I do quickly wanna touch on, I know it's just about 1 o'clock, but I this must be discussed before we log off for today. Please talk to us about your choice to, declutter your digital life for a little bit.
Yeah.
You told me this before we got on. I was surprised because that is how people know you. They know you online. They know you on your social media platforms. That's how so many people come across your content. Find your books, find your Netflix specials, find your podcast, and that is how you are supported. I mean, leading up to all of that, you have your Patreon and like your fans support you. So how the heck did you get the guts to make that decision?
Yeah. Well, what I've learned is that minimalism goes beyond the physical clutter.
Hmm.
There's the emotional clutter, there's the financial clutter, there's the calendar clutter that we talked about. There's a lot of different types of clutter in our lives. But one of those types of clutter, especially now, is digital clutter. And we have access to all of these glowing screens, and technology is wonderful. So I'm not anti-technology, I'm not a Luddite, but last year was the minimalist most successful year in terms of reaching people. We
Mm.
reached about 500 million people via our social media channels, whether it's Instagram or
Incredible.
Facebook or any of these other places. And I'm not deleting those accounts, but we decided, okay, We're at the top of our game. We're winning according to these sort of societal conventions and their standards. But at some point, it starts to feel like an obligation. And if I
Mm,
feel obligated to post on social media, for me, it wasn't about my personal use of social media. I already had that under control. I didn't have Instagram or Facebook or X on my phone. But I found that we were obligated almost professionally to post something every day. And I realized that, wait a minute, if I'm obligated, I'm no longer in control. If I'm not in control, then this is potentially a type of clutter. And so,
mm,
anytime I want to decide whether or not something adds value to my life, whether it is a book or a clock or a lamp or a couch or my social media, I remove it from my life for a period of time to determine whether or not it was actually adding any value. And we decided to do that with social media for 2024. The rest of 2024, we said we're not going to do social media. We are going to completely remove ourselves from all of those platforms. So the things are still out there. If you want to go back and watch archives, you're welcome to do that. But I'm no longer obligated to, I'm not going to post anything for the rest of the year, and then see whether or not it makes sense to return at all. Is it going to destroy my business? Or if so, that's fine too, if it improves my life in some way. I'm not married to post anything on social media, but the initial benefits so far have been quite unexpected. There are more people showing up to our live events. There are more people listening to our podcast on Spotify or Apple or Overcast or wherever they listen to podcasts. And so I didn't expect that. I thought we'd lose a large chunk of our audience. And maybe we did, broadly speaking. We're not going to reach 500 million people this year, but we're going to go much deeper with the people who actually care about simplifying their lives and removing the chaos. And so we're focused much more on the long form podcast, and we're working on another film as well. And maybe social media was just a distraction. Now, here's the beautiful
wow.
thing. I didn't expect. I didn't encourage anyone else to do the same thing. We've had thousands of people in our audience who said, "Hey, I'm going to
Mm,
do this too. I'm going to hop off social media for the rest of the year and just see what happens." And at first you feel that twitch, like, oh, wait, I'm going to read. Oh, wait, it's not there anymore. I can't go there. And maybe I'll replace my Instagram app with a Kindle app on my phone. Instead of going to Instagram, now I'm reading a book every time I feel that impulse to check
mm.
my device. And so, what am I replacing that social media with? Maybe it's more time with my family. Maybe it's more time with meditation or contemplation. Maybe it is more time reading books. Maybe it's more time exercising. What am I freeing up time for? How might your life be better with less social media?
It's a brave and bold move in 2024 to do something like that. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it made me sweaty to hear you describe that because I think I suffer from a lot of those afflictions as someone who exists in the online space. And I certainly feel tied to this and I love the work that I do. But it's like you got to feed that algorithm, you got to feed that beast. You have to keep coming out with content. You've got to find ways to continually engage. And most of the time I love it, and some of the time I really struggle because I'm just not in the mood, or I'm having a bad day, or
Yes.
something's going on in my personal life, and I really wish that I didn't have to show up that day.
Well, I
And
think
social
the
media
algorithm
can
is
be hard.
right, right, and I think a lot of it has to do with that algorithm you just mentioned,
Yeah,
feeding the algorithm. The
yeah,
algorithm is corrupting. And what I found, even for me, who was not that focused on how do I maximize or optimize clicks or views or whatever, I did find myself toward the end of the last 3.5 years, we posted a video every single day on every platform.
exhausting. It's
Right,
exhausting.
right, and I wasn't even the one. We had 4 different employees managing that, doing video and then doing the TikTok clips and doing transcripts and doing the comments and all this other stuff. But even that becomes exhausting, managing all of that. But it also even worse than it being exhausting, because exhausting can be great, if you run for a while or you go for a sprint or a swim, that's a good kind of exhausting, right? But this became obligatory. I
Mm,
became an employee of the algorithm, and I found myself, okay, how do I do this podcast episode so that there'll be a 60-second clip that we can put up on wherever,
Social.
X,
Yeah.
anywhere on social media, on Instagram or TikTok. And I don't even think those outlets are inherently evil or bad. I think the algorithm is corrupting, and it makes us it makes us do things we wouldn't otherwise feel compelled to do in order to get this new currency of likes and views. And it's like we're optimizing for fame or something like that. And that's
Mm.
not a game that I want to play any part in.
Fascinating. And again, for anyone who's in the audience or watching this afterward, this is the reason why the minimalists are such wonderful people to follow, because it's not just about the clutter. And I just said follow, even though you're not on social media, but pardon my language. But listening to their podcast, visiting their website, downloading their free printables, playing the game, picking up the books, attending a live event, watching the Netflix documentaries. There are so many different ways that you can learn from them, and they go deep. And it's about that fundamental shift. It's not just about the symptomatic, getting rid of things that don't, serve you anymore. It's so much deeper than that. And that is why I think you are so special in the work that you do. And you have really changed people's lives. And I know that you are all very proud of that. And as a friend, I'm very proud of that too. So it's been such a joy having you on here today and just hearing you share your wisdom. And please let the audience know where they can find you and anything they should be excited about that's coming down the pipe for you.
Oh, if you want to find more, you can just check out the Minimalist podcast, and everything we do is at theminimalists.com. If you feel compelled, but no pressure. We also have a free newsletter on our website as well. That's a great way to stay in touch with us if you want more of less.
There you go. It was such a pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful weekend in sunny California, and wherever you are watching from, I hope you have a wonderful weekend as well. And we will see you back here next week. Take good care, everyone.
Much love.